Hello, dear listener. Before we begin, welcome both longtime friends and newcomers to tonight's gentle exploration. Tonight we slip back in time to the shaded courtyards of early Ming China, where you lean over a steaming basin of herbal water as morning light filters through paper windows. You might expect calm bliss, yet let's be honest, you're here partly because someone told you foot binding wasn't exactly a spa day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're ready to embrace centuries-old routines. Feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments so I know where you're unwinding from. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in a modest courtyard to home in the capital around 1500. Your grandmother sits beside you, ladling warm water scented with jasmine and mugwort into a carved wooden basin. Steam spirals upward, painting soft halos on the courtyard's whitewashed walls. The silk ribbons and tiny scissors lie nearby, unnervingly silent. Your feet, tightly bound since childhood, curl toward the ground in unnatural arcs. Already you feel the morning's chill ease as the herbal heat seeps into your arches. The concoction shimmers, crushed apricot kernels, dried chrysanthemum petals, and a pinch of rice flour. Its sweetness mingles with mugwort's earthy bite. Li Mei, the household maid, pours more water from a charcoal brazier, and you inhale sharply as warmth spreads through your toes. A whisper floats through your mind. Historians still debate how these footbath rituals began amid footbinding's harsher origins. You trace the basin's edge and feel every knot and imperfection in the wood. Across Ming society, small lotus-shaped feet were prized. Mainstream families believed that a properly softened foot bore higher status and allure. Even so, in your household, this nightly soak is about survival as much as beauty. You remember learning that foot binding truly took hold during the Song dynasty, but by the Ming, it became a defining marker of femininity. Your grandmother says earlier, generations endured their bindings without such indulgent soaks, only brine solutions that left feet stiffer, not softer. A quirky detail floats to the surface. Villagers in distant provinces speak of adding powdered donkey-hide gelatin to their foot baths. They claim this secret ingredient keeps water warm longer and imparts strength to brittle bones. Your grandmother shudders at the memory of a neighbour who nearly glued her feet to the wooden tub by miscalculating proportions. You laugh, partly from relief that your solution is simpler. Soft light filters in as you settle deeper, candle flames flickering. The courtyard's wooden beams creak and the clatter of a passing cart echoes faintly. You tilt your head back, feeling heat pulse beneath your skin. Somewhere a crow caws, and this mingled scents of jasmine and mugwort swirl around you. Your bound feet begin to relax, the tight bandages yielding to the water's caress. Your grandmother sprinkles rose petals across the surface. They drift like drifting lanterns, petals unfolding in warm liquid. You sink lower, massaging your toes against the basin's smooth curve. A subtle satisfaction ripples through you. Your feet, once rigid, soften imperceptibly under the fragrant waters. The small padded arches begin to feel almost pliant. In the corner, a small bronze brazier glows and crackles. Smoke spirals upward, meeting the basin's steam in a silent dance. You inhale the bracing scent of camphor oil as Grandma rubs it between her palms and applies it to your heels. You imagine the oil threading into every crack, chasing away the sting left from yesterday's binding. The scent pricks your senses, sharp enough to banish lingering discomfort. As your senses sink into this spa-like hush, you reflect on how foot soaking became a household ritual. By the early Ming, privileged homes invested in specialized tubs and herb blends. Grandmothers passed recipes down like family heirlooms. Even in modest homes, mothers cut costs by foraging wild plants along the Yangtze's banks. The resulting mixture was more about necessity than luxury, yet somehow carried the same whispered promise: relief. Your mind drifts to the contrast between bustling markets and quiet courtyards. Merchants hawked dried herbs in woven baskets, touting their mixtures as perfect for lotus feet. You half smile, imagining a peddler calling out ingredients like precious gems. The water itself was treated almost as currency. Lukewarm baths suggested poverty, while bubbling basins hinted at affluence. Beneath the surface, you sense a deeper purpose. Foot baths marked a moment of care in women's daily toil. They turned pain into ritual, binding the next generation to both heritage and suffering. Yet tonight, in this early Ming morning, pain becomes a softened whisper. Your toes spread slightly under the water's warmth, and you catch yourself sighing as muscle aches slip away. Before you know it, you realise the courtyard has become a sheltered cocoon. The sun's rays stretch across mosaic tiles, but you barely notice. You're enveloped in steam and scent, suspended between past and present. The footbath's hush seems to slow time itself. No rushing chores, no pressing obligations. Your grandmother hums an old lullaby as she checks the water's temperature. You respond with a contented nod and press both palms to your chest, as if to anchor yourself in this gentle moment. A single droplet of sweat traces your temple, mingling with the mugwort scent. Even your breathing deepens, matching the rhythmic pattern of her humming. You lift a foot and examine the softened skin. The binding cloth beneath the water is less rigid now, bending more like a willow branch than an iron clasp. The transformation, though slight, feels miraculous. Your ankles flex and the cords sag a bit. Only tomorrow, when they're rewrapped, will reality return. But for now, you luxuriate in this small mercy. This is your first step into a world where foot baths and binding rituals intertwine. A ritual where pain is acknowledged and soothed, if only temporarily. You close your eyes, letting the fragrant petals float by, and allow the early Ming courtyard to cradle you, preparing you for the deeper stories yet to unfold. You're still in that courtyard, the basin water now lukewarm and flecked with petal fragments that cling to your ankles. Your toes, uncurled slightly by the soak, rest in that delicate state between comfort and the creeping return of tension. As the scent of chrysanthemum fades, your grandmother hands you a cloth, worn soft by years of identical motions. You dry your feet gently, knowing the next part is coming, the wrapping. But before the cloths tighten, you pause. Let's rewind a little. You picture yourself younger, perhaps 6 or 7, perched on a low stool as the process began. At that age, foot binding still felt like dress-up, a mimicry of womanhood rather than its weight. The bindings were looser then, more ceremonial than surgical, and back then foot baths weren't a nightly necessity. They were an occasional indulgence, a warm basin to mark the start of your transformation. It wasn't always so elaborate. Foot binding began centuries earlier, and historians agree the practice started during the Song dynasty as a courtly trend. But during the Ming dynasty, it solidified into a cultural expectation. What began as a symbol of elite delicacy had by now trickled through merchant families and even to ambitious farmers' daughters. Binding had become routine, yet the rituals that grew up around it, like these foot baths, evolved more slowly, their origins interwoven with femininity, family, and fatigue. You remember the day your mother first added slices of ginger to the bath, not for scent, but for circulation. To keep the blood moving so your toes don't die, she said with a mix of care and utter nonchalance. It struck you then how closely comfort and cruelty danced in these rituals. The bath soothed your aching joints, but only so they could endure the next day's tightening. Among wealthier families, this transition from simple soaking to ceremonial foot care happened early. Records describe young girls being bathed by household attendants who whispered chants as they worked. Chants meant to encourage softening or calm the fire in the bones. You've heard that in some southern provinces, mothers hung silk tassels over the basin to catch bad spirits released through the feet. That's the part that stayed with you. Not the chant, not the rapping, but the idea that pain had ghosts and the bath was where they left your body. Tonight, that idea still feels plausible. You slip your feet into a fresh basin, now filled with milky rice water. It's warm again. Someone must have discreetly changed it, and it's laced with a thin layer of sesame oil. The surface glimmers faintly in the flickering lantern light. You wiggle your toes beneath the water, still tender from the earlier soak, and wonder if these layers of ritual were meant to distract from the deeper purpose. Or maybe they were always sincere, a cultural coping mechanism cloaked in petals and oils. Your grandmother hums again. This time an old folk tune from the Jiangnan region, where the humid summers demanded daily baths just to ease swelling. There, families added crushed bamboo leaf to reduce puffiness, especially in the rainy season. She once told you about her cousin who moved north to marry a scholar, and how the dry air cracked her feet despite nightly soaking. She started adding lard to her bath. Disgusting, your grandmother snorted, but effective. You reach for the cloths. They're soft, dyed a pale gold from repeated herbal use. You remember learning how to roll them evenly, too tight, and you risk bruising the skin you just softened. Too loose, and the bones won't hold their curve. There's a balance to everything. You wrap slowly now, the rhythm of the cloth passing over skin matching your breath. Once, this step made you flinch. Now, you know where the pressure should land and where to hold back. It's an art, passed matrilinearly like family recipes or stubbornness. You pause to sniff the air. Someone's burning citrus peel nearby. That's a trick from your neighbour, Madame Chen, who swears by it for clearing footbath humidity from the lungs. A quirky but oddly effective hack. Madame Chen also insists on adding 2 coins to the water to attract fortune, even if your feet are the only part of you touching it. You tried it once, just for fun. The only thing you attracted was a suspicious green tint on your soles. Still, you wonder, could that be part of it too? A tiny belief that something sacred, some transformation, happens in that steaming water. A softening of not just feet, but spirit. You hear your grandmother's voice again, softer now. A good foot bath prepares you for the hard walk of life. She says it every evening like a prayer. By the time your feet are wrapped, the pain returns. Subtle, like a memory knocking from the other side of a wall. You stand, wobbly but balanced, and step onto the cool stone floor. The wet warmth of the bath still clings to you, and you shuffle slowly, cautiously. Even wrapped, your softened feet feel fragile, like they've been taken apart and rearranged. You remember a story once whispered between cousins, a girl in Hangzhou who bathed her feet in goat's milk stolen from a neighbour's barn. She believed it would make her feet as white as jade. Her mother beat her when she found out. Not because of the theft, but because milk was too slippery, she said, that made the feet too soft, the bindings couldn't hold. Too much softness, after all, was dangerous. You sit back down as the night air creeps in and a gust brushes your cheek. In this moment, you're aware that the ritual is no longer just about vanity. It's survival through habit, endurance through repetition. The bath doesn't erase the pain, it recontextualizes it. You begin to understand that these rituals, these quiet soaks and herbal whispers, serve a deeper function. They stitch you to the generations before you. The basin, now set aside, glints dully under moonlight. Its steam has faded, its warmth spent, but its memory lingers, on your skin, in the air, in the curve of your foot. You exhale through your nose a long, slow breath and rest your bound feet on a folded towel. There's a softness here, yes, but beneath it a strength tempered by water and will. And so the ritual ends, for now. The story, though, is only beginning. The basin is now empty, set to dry by the courtyard door. A few petals cling to its damp wood, like sleepy witnesses of your nightly ordeal. Your feet, wrapped once again, throb in the familiar way, a rhythmic protest, quiet but unrelenting. You move carefully across the courtyard stone tiles, the moon casting long shadows as your silk slippers whisper with each step. Tonight there's a new blend steeping in the back room. Sandalwood chips, sweet osmanthus, and the peel of green oranges. It's not for you, but for your cousin Xiao Ying, who's visiting from the capital. You catch the scent as it slips through the rafters, sharp and floral at once, and immediately recognise it. Imperial-style foot soak. Your grandmother says she learned the recipe during her brief stint in the outer kitchens of a noble household. She doesn't say whose exactly, but her eyes always flick sideways when she mentions those palace girls with their gilded ankles. You imagine Xiao Ying's feet, bound tighter than yours, stepping from lacquered palanquins with practiced precision, her bindings loosened only for nightly court rituals involving eunuchs, scrolls and basins filled by hand. Imperial influence on footbath rituals can't be overstated. During the early Ming, the court became an unspoken model for domestic practices across the empire. If the empress preferred rose hip infusions, suddenly markets in Suzhou overflowed with rose hips. If a concubine was rumoured to favour crushed pearl dust in her soaks, yes, crushed pearl, local vendors were selling oyster shells ground within an inch of irrelevance. You once tried one of those luxury foot powders. It made your feet shimmer faintly in the moonlight, and itch for 2 days. Fashion from the court trickled down like silk ribbon, slow but inevitable. Your cousin, being closer to that world, always arrives with a travelling pouch of rare herbs and oils. She says the Empress herself uses powdered amber for inner foot warmth. You tried to ask how amber could possibly be warm, and Xiao Ying just blinked like you were the mad one. Still, there's no denying it. Palace rituals elevated foot baths from utilitarian to aspirational. In the Forbidden City, the foot bath became a ceremony. First, attendants warmed the room with coal braziers, fanned the steam just so, and played soft zithers in the background, probably to drown out the not-so-zen sound of cracked bones shifting in water. Then came the water itself, steeped in a blend that changed by season. Cooling lotus leaf in summer, invigorating ginger root in winter, and always a drop of camellia oil for shine. Your grandmother scoffs when she recalls these details, muttering about how noble women had attendants to lift their feet for them. But sometimes, when she thinks no one's looking, you catch her measuring sandalwood slivers with care, murmuring the imperial ratios under her breath. Tonight, you let Xiao Ying lead the ritual. You watch her with interest. Her movements are fluid, her fingers precise as she arranges the towels, lines the basin, and adds the soaking blend like it's a magic spell. A delicate puff of steam escapes the bowl, and for a moment you almost believe it is. She steps into the water with the flair of someone born to it. You notice how her bindings are narrower than yours, but her posture holds no pain. How? Is it the amber dust? She just better at pretending. You consider asking, but she's already humming a court melody, the kind forbidden outside palace walls. You hum back, slightly off-key, and she raises an eyebrow. As the two of you soak in companionable siddhis, she shares a nugget you haven't heard before. Apparently palace physicians once designed a schedule for foot care that aligned with the moon phases. A full moon soak draws out toxins, she says with the certainty of someone who believes it. You look up at the night sky, note the waning crescent, and wonder if you've missed your detox window. A fringe detail emerges in her story, one that gives you pause. She claims that in certain hidden quarters of the palace, eunuchs added powdered snake skin to the water to help reshape poorly formed feet. You can't decide if that's horrifying or just deeply inconvenient. You imagine scaly residue at the bottom of the tub and try not to gag. Still, you know the court was always filled with strange cures, whispered among concubines like poetry or poison. You lean back and let the warmth wrap around your ankles. Outside, a cat yowls lazily on the roof tiles, and the faint clink of distant cups suggests someone else is awake, perhaps brewing tea for their own bath. You envy the Empress a little, with her staff of silent attendants and golden basins carved with phoenixes. But then again, maybe her feet ache just the same under all that luxury. Your grandmother returns to check on you both, nods approvingly at the scent of the blend, and hands you a scroll. On it are drawn several diagrams, rudimentary foot maps passed down to show where pressure should be applied during post-soak massage. She believes in these charts like others believe in prayer. Massage the heel to chase nightmares, she says, pointing. Rub the arch to ease hunger. It's hard not to laugh. Xiao Ying rolls her eyes but dutifully massages her heel anyway. You mimic her, fingers pressing into the still damp skin. You feel a slight pop and wince, but also oddly lighter. Maybe the map's onto something, or maybe the placebo is part of the magic. In this moment you realise how far footbath rituals have come. From haphazard household routines to court-defined ceremonies observed and imitated across every social class. It's more than a soaker, it's performance, power, identity, even rebellion in tiny, fragrant ways. You glance at your cousin. Her eyes are half-lidded, her head tipped back in the candlelight. The palace may shape her rituals, but tonight she's just another girl with sore feet in a basin of water. Your own feet float, weightless for now. You let them rise, then sink again slowly, as if the water might suspend time itself. Maybe this is why the court took it so seriously. Maybe this moment, the hush between pain and ritual, is the closest anyone gets to peace. The candlelight flickers lower now, slumping toward its wick like a servant falling asleep mid-task. The bath is over, but neither you nor Xiao Ying moves. The heat still lingers, trapped in the cloth wraps around your feet, while the scent of sandalwood and osmanthus hangs in the air like a lazy melody refusing to resolve. You're both quiet, but not in that uncomfortable way. More like the stillness after a performance, when the curtain has dropped and everyone exhales at once. You stare at the empty basin, and it strikes you how much ritual is crammed into such a small object. A foot bath is humble, even rustic, but it carries all the weight of class, history, and sore tendons. Eventually, Xiao Ying stands, muttering something about getting the capital chill out of her knees. You nod, more out of sympathy than understanding. She retreats with a sigh, trailing the scent of amber and floral oil behind her like perfume. You're alone again. The basin is cleaned and flipped. The towels hang like sleepy ghosts on a drying rack near the kitchen door. But the night isn't done. Not quite. You step out into the corridor that leads to the side wing of the household. It's cooler here, the wind sharper against the damp cloth around your feet. A servant nods as you pass, too discreet to comment on your slight limp. You pause at the doorway to peek inside the side chamber where the older women sit. They're gathered around a low brazier, embroidering quietly. The same routine every evening: stitch, sip, soak, wrap. None of them talk about the baths anymore. They just do them, like they breathe, like they sleep. But you remember something your aunt once said, years ago, as she cooled her bound feet after a summer soak. We keep the basin because we're not allowed to scream. That one stuck with you. Inside the room, one of the women hums, an older cousin with a voice like cracked paper. It's an old funeral tune, oddly calming in its monotony. You remember hearing it once during a wake in the village, and you find it strange how the same melody soothes both the dead and the sore-footed. You think about your aunt's words again, the basin a silent protest, a daily scream reduced to water, to perfumed vapours and herbal salves. Maybe that's the key. The bath is both balm and muzzle. Tonight, you prepare your own second soak. Not mandatory, but sometimes necessary. You're not alone in that. In fact, among older women or those whose bindings were started late, a second soak became common practice. Something to undo the day's pressure, even if it couldn't undo the decades. You choose chrysanthemum and mugwort this time. Mugwort was once believed to chase away foot demons, or more likely fungal infections. But let's be honest, calling a bunion a demon adds much needed drama. As you wait for the herbs to steep, your mind drifts to the daily maintenance hidden behind the glamour of bound feet. People speak of the binding as if the initial wrapping were the hardest part. But the real work came later. Daily cleaning, soaking and rewrapping. Not just to preserve the shape, but to prevent rot. Yes, rot. Body talks about it at the tea table. But you've seen what happens when someone skips a day. Skin splits, nails turn black. Entire toes sometimes just give up. And so the bath became a weapon of hygiene as much as beauty. You recall a neighbour whose mother made her carry a foot bath to school every day. Yes, to school. She'd soak her feet during lunch behind a curtain. Everyone knew, but no one said anything. She's married now, with a shoe size so small you could wear her slippers as hair clips. Tonight you pour the hot water slowly, letting it cloud with herbs. The steam coils upward like breath from the earth. The basin rests on a bamboo mat, the kind your grandfather weaved before his fingers stiffened. You settle in, feet first. The water scalds, but only for a second, then the warmth diffuses through your bones like wine through your belly. You lean your head back and count ceiling rafters. 5. No, 7. There's one hidden in shadow. You imagine the rafters are bones too, stretched and bent but holding firm. As the soak seeps into your muscles, you think of the saying your grandmother muttered when you were small. The tighter the foot, the tighter the fate. You didn't get it then. You thought it meant more elegant shoes, but now you hear the edge in her voice, the bitterness behind the proverb. A small foot meant a narrow path. Few choices, few freedoms. A basin full of herbs might be the only indulgence allowed. Some evenings, a travelling healer passes through town offering foot soaks with energy realignment. He wears a badger fur hat and smells like cloves. You went once. He poured a greenish liquid into your basin and whispered at it. He claimed your left foot had resentment stored in the second toe. You laughed, but also, strangely, you slept well that night. You stare now at your own second toe, barely visible under the herbal murk. It looks resigned. Your toes have long since given up on the individual identity. They're a unit now, a curled, compressed mass, trained to serve aesthetics over anatomy. The soak ends when the water cools and your skin feels loose, like it's forgotten its structure. You towel off slowly, wrapping the digits carefully, then massaging ointment into the arches. Not much remains of the original foot, but what's there still demands care. You shuffle back toward the main house, passing the half-closed door of the embroidery room. The older women are still stitching. One of them coughs quietly, and another dips her toes into a copper pot too small to be comfortable. She winces, then sighs, then hums, and so the cycle continues. You pass a hallway shelf filled with old basins, some chipped, some lacquered, all retired. Each one a museum of past soakings. One even has initials carved into the side. Your great-grandmother's, maybe. You think of how many generations have soaked their pain in petals and steam, in water that remembered every ache but spoke of none. The basin in your hands is still warm. You carry it like a fragile gift. You've never screamed. But tonight your feet are singing. You wake late the next morning, or perhaps it's early. Hard to tell when the dreams are foggy and the light is watery. Your feet feel heavy, wrapped in their damp overnight cloth, the musk of mugwort and chrysanthemum still clinging faintly to your sheets. You sit up slowly, legs dangling over the edge of the kang bed. The floor is cool beneath your soles, and the pressure is already there, subtle but familiar, like the whisper of a storm still forming over the mountain. By now, foot binding is a fact of your day, like sun-up, like breakfast gruel, and the bath is its necessary sequel. You pad across the courtyard to where your grandmother is already hunched over a boiling pot, stirring in a generous handful of goji berries and dried orange peel. This morning's soak will be a quick one, just to soften the skin before the rewrapping. She doesn't speak, just hands you the basin, with that time-worn nod that means sit, soak, endure. You oblige, as your feet slip into the water, warm enough to make you wince. You think about just how far back this ritual stretches. Your grandmother soaked her feet in a nearly identical way, as did hers, and hers before that. Generations of women following the same routine, each believing, perhaps reluctantly, that there was no alternative. Or, if there was, it was not for them. Historians still argue about the origin of this whole tradition. Was it imperial whimsy, a clever erotic invention, or something darker, more structural? Some claim it started with court dancers in the Tang dynasty, Others blame one particular Song concubine with unusually tiny feet and an emperor smitten enough to start a trend. Either way, by the Ming dynasty, it had calcified into culture. A bound foot wasn't just a foot, it was status, submission, value. And the foot bath? That was the maintenance fee for existing in this tightly wrapped body. What's remarkable, though, is how these practices spread not just through bloodlines, but through household hierarchies. You remember hearing how concubines, servants, and wives each had their own soak schedule, their own recipes, their own rules. In some wealthier homes, a woman's place in the household could be mapped by the ingredients in her foot bath. Plain salt water for lower maids, jasmine and camphor for wives, exotic imported resins for concubines lucky enough to curry favour. You once overheard a housemaid whisper that she added fish bones to her mistress's soak when she wanted her to trip. Slippery revenge for an unpaid wage. The mistress never noticed, but did stumble on the stairs 3 days later. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe foot baths are more political than anyone wants to admit. You shift slightly in your basin and notice the water turning cloudy around your feet. Dead skin sloughing off, or perhaps bits of yesterday. You've come to appreciate this part, the visible proof that something is changing even if the shape of your feet remains stubbornly curled. Grandmother eyes you from across the room. She's rolling gauze on a flat bamboo tray, folding it with the kind of precision usually reserved for sacred scripts. She motions for you to lift one foot. You do. The skin puckers in the chill air, soft but not too soft. That balance is important. Too much soak and the wrapping won't hold. Too little and the cracking returns. She wraps quickly, in that firm, practiced way that always makes you wince but never cry. You've learnt not to cry. Crying once made your aunt slap your ankle and mutter about softness of spirit being the real deformity. There's a pattern to the wrap, under the toes, over the arch, pull tight, loop back, bind again. It's as familiar as a lullaby, and yet it surprises you how fast it happens. Your foot disappears again beneath layers of linen and habit. The quiet is broken only by the squawk of a hen in the courtyard and the low creak of a cart in the alley beyond. You wonder how many feet are soaking in this town right now. 10, 20, 100. It's oddly comforting in a bleak way. You're part of a collective choreography of suffering scented with flowers. Later, as you stretch your legs back onto the kang to rest, you recall something your tutor said about Taoist alchemists during the Ming. They sought immortality through balance, refining both body and spirit through careful routines. You wonder if your grandmother sees the foot bath that way, an alchemy of survival. She would laugh at the word, but maybe it fits. In fact, you once saw her pull a thin jade bead from her apron pocket and drop it silently into her own soak. You asked why. She told you jade reminds the feet of the earth. You didn't question her again. This morning, though, she surprises you. After the final wrap, she brings over a slip of yellowed paper. It's a recipe. In her careful brushwork, you see night soak for swelling, followed by a list of ingredients and instructions. Try this tomorrow, she says. You're ready. You feel honoured. Yes, being entrusted with a recipe is no small gesture. It means you are no longer just the one who suffers the ritual. You now maintain it. In the margin, she's written something else, in a smaller hand. If you forget the measures, trust your nose. Of course she would say that. She always did believe the body remembers what the mind forgets. And as the basin is emptied once more and the wraps tug gently against your heels, you think how this whole thing, this daily ritual of soak and bind, isn't just preservation, it's inheritance. Not always wanted, not always kind, but passed down like a stubborn heirloom too fragile to throw away. You glance again at the yellow paper, its ink slightly smudged from her fingers. Tomorrow you'll try the recipe, but tonight your feet are tight and clean, your linen binding still damp with memory. The basin, empty and steaming faintly, waits by the door. Later that week, under skies the colour of worn silk, you find yourself standing in the open-air courtyard again, a fresh basin in hand, staring at a crooked line of bricks near the old well. That's where your cousin Ming used to sit to soak her feet, always the same spot, as if the bricks had grown to expect her. She's married off now, sent north to a merchant's son who, legend has it, can't tell a steamed bun from a boiled dumpling. But he liked her feet, so that was that. You set your basin down there today for nostalgia's sake. The wind's picked up, which means it's red clay season again. Dust clings to your robe, and tiny grains find their way into the water, giving your soak a murky, earthy tint. You don't mind, it adds character. Today's mixture is what grandmother calls a fatigue soak. Sichuan peppercorn, dried chrysanthemum, and 2 thin slices of licorice root. You were suspicious at first. Now you admit your feet feel like steamed buns after it. As you settle in, the basin cupping your soles like a cradle, you glance across the courtyard. 2 servant girls are arguing quietly about who gets the good sandals today. You smirk. The good sandals have extra padding stitched inside, thin as dumpling skin but a luxury all the same. They're patched to oblivion, but no one minds. In this house, footwear is both practical and deeply emotional, which is ironic, isn't it? You go through all this pain, this shaping, soaking, wrapping, only to keep your feet hidden inside shoes, tiny embroidered prisons you wear like trophies. Some women get sentimental about shoes. They collect them like love letters. Others, like your Aunt Hui, treat them with indifference. "Why bother fussing over what no one sees?" she once said, while flinging a pair out the window during a tantrum. That tantrum, by the way, was caused by her 3rd toe breaking again during festival season. She still danced, wobbled more than twirled, but no one dared say it. Today you pull out your best pair, red satin with a peony embroidered on the vamp. They were stitched by your great-aunt, who lost her eyesight but never her precision. She used to say she could feel the thread walk. The shoes were a wedding gift you haven't used yet, but wearing them makes the foot bath feel more ceremonial, like dressing up for yourself. That's something no one teaches you. How much of this ritual is private theatre? The soak, for instance, is rarely shared outside close circles. It's intimate in a way that surprises outsiders. You don't just dip your feet in water, you peel back your identity, layer by layer, until only the tender core is left. Then you pour hot tea on it and pretend you're fine. A neighbour once claimed that noble women in Hangzhou added pearls to their foot baths. Actual pearls. Not crushed, not infused, just plunked in whole. To reflect the soul, she said. You weren't sure if she meant literally or just poetically, but the image stuck. Feet soaking among glittering orbs of calcium carbonate like oysters gossiping. The scholar's wife down the road insists on reading poetry aloud while she soaks, not for anyone else, just for the feet. They deserve elegant, she once told you without irony. You tried it once, but the verses made you feel judged, so you went back to humming. Tonight, though, you feel experimental. You like one of those odd incense sticks from the travelling market, smells like fennel and burnt rice. You swish the water with your fingers, watch the ripples, then ease your feet in. The skin prickles, adjusting to the heat, and you press down, letting the bones surrender. It occurs to you how odd the bones feel, even after all these years. Like they're not yours. You flex your toes slightly and they barely move. It's not pain, it's absence. That's what people never say. The pain fades. But the strangeness doesn't. You're always aware, like wearing someone else's gloves, a size too small. And yet, there's comfort in the ritual, in the exactness of it. You know the measurements by feel now. 3 pinches of herb, half a ladle of salt, 1 sigh of steam. You soak, you dry, you wrap. And each motion becomes a sentence in a language only your body understands. Sometimes you think about unbinding, not seriously, but the thought visits, like a stray cat. You've heard of women doing it, mostly in port cities, where foreign ideas drift in like fog and people start questioning things. Natural feet, they say, like it's something brave, not just something left undone, but not here, not in this courtyard with its red clay dust and arguing servants and herbal steam. Here, the bath is the balm. It's what makes the bindings tolerable. You remember that once, during the spring festival, Your cousin slipped on wet stones and split the seam of her foot. They unwrapped her for days. Her bath was a slurry of ginger and black vinegar, and she wept not from pain but shame. It wasn't the wound, it was being seen undone. You didn't look, not out of kindness, but because you knew if you did, you'd never forget. Your basin water has cooled. You wiggle your feet slightly, watching bits of peppercorn drift like debris. There's a blister forming under your left pinky toe, just a tender spot now, but you know what's coming. Tomorrow's soak will need extra care. You dry off slowly, wrapping your feet like silk dumplings, one layer at a time, pressing the cloth down until it conforms. There's a peace in this part too, the order of it. Like sealing a letter to yourself, shoes on, you stand, the familiar pull, the tilt forward. Your spine compensates as always. Your hips know what to do. You walk across the courtyard, your footsteps soft and oddly powerful, measured not in distance but in legacy. The basin, emptied and rinsed, rests near the bricks again. Waiting for tomorrow, and somewhere in the back of your mind a whisper, if pearls can reflect the soul, what does red clay remember? The rain arrives without warning, sliding off the eaves and pattering against the flagstones with the gentle persistence of a mother tapping a child to sleep. You're inside now, curled by the fire, feet freshly wrapped, propped up on a lacquered stool that still carries a faint scent of tung oil and sandalwood. The rain has shifted everything, air, mood, even your bones. Dampness makes the aches more articulate. Grandmother doesn't let you soak during storms. Too much moisture will swell the toes, she mutters, always with the same wary side-eye at the sky. Instead, she hands you a cloth pouch filled with roasted millet to warm your feet. You press it gently against your arches. The heat seeps in, softer than bath water, more direct. A different kind of comfort. Without your soak, the day feels untethered. No basin, no steam, no floating herbs to hypnotize you. You feel exposed, even wrapped. Your thoughts wander. You think about a girl from the next village who came to market once, walking flat-footed, bold as a goose. You remember the silence she left behind. Even the fishmonger stared. Her feet, unbound and sturdy, seemed to mock everyone around her, even the paving stones. People said her family were rebels or mad. Others whispered they were just poor. Sometimes you wonder what it felt like to walk like that, heel to toe, without the constant brace of cloth and pressure. What did her feet feel like in the grass, in the river, in the cold? Did she need to soak them at all? Then again, perhaps she had her own rituals. Historians rarely write about women like her, the ones who slipped between the lines of conformity, who didn't bathe their feet in jasmine or clove, but in stream water and stubbornness. Their stories get lost, not for lack of meaning, but for lack of documentation. But you digress. The millet pouch is cooling. You shift your weight, wincing as one wrap digs in more than it should. You'll have to redo it tonight. Adjust the tension. That's the thing no one tells you. Foot binding isn't static. It breathes. The wraps shift slightly each day. The foot responds like a stubborn animal, tightening here, relaxing there. You learn to listen. There's a faded scroll on the far wall, something your grandfather commissioned before he died. It depicts a woman bathing her feet in a shallow jade basin, plum blossoms scattered across the surface like soft punctuation marks. At first glance it's delicate, poetic even. But look closer and you'll see her jaw is clenched, her brow furrowed. She's in pain, graceful, aesthetic pain, the kind that gets brushed into art and turned into legacy. You've stared at that scroll for years, and only recently noticed the basin's been painted slightly askew. A subtle rebellion, or a mistake the artist hoped no one would catch. You rather like it. Outside, the rain lets up, just a drizzle now clinging to the air like memory. You remember your uncle once told a story about a Ming princess, spoiled, opinionated, and deeply invested in her footbaths. She insisted on soaking daily with snowmelt, believing it would keep her skin pale and her bones sharp. course, her attendants hated it. They had to hike to the hills and chip away at frozen streams every morning. One finally snapped and slipped hot stones into her bath. The princess, oblivious, declared it her best soak yet. You often wonder which part of the story is true, the snow, the stones, or the satisfaction. The ritual isn't always elegant. One time you mixed the ingredients in the wrong order and ended up with a foamy, sulphurous mess that scared the neighbour's cat and made your aunt cough for a week. You never lived that down. Now you always add vinegar last. Live and learn. You once asked grandmother why so many herbs go into the soak. Why not just use water? She answered with a shrug. 'Cause you're not just softening feet, you're softening memory. You didn't know what that meant at the time, you still don't entirely. But you're starting to suspect that the bath isn't about the feet at all. Not really. It's about creating something you can control. The bindings, for all their cruelty, are precise. The soak, with its warming fragrance and steady heat, is predictable. Even your mistakes become part of the pattern, like using too much peppercorn or letting the gauze twist. It's all part of a language you've grown fluent in, 1 foot at a time. Rain or not, your soles tingle, craving the basin. You settle for wiping them with a hot cloth instead, dabbing gently around the pressure points. Grandmother says you can tell a woman's spirit by how she tends to her own pain. You suspect this means she approves of you more than she says. There's something else you've begun to notice lately, an ache not of the body, but of something deeper. A kind of ghost limb. Not the toes you've lost the use of, but the version of you that never underwent this at all. That other self, with wide feet and wider strides, may be learning calligraphy instead of compliance. Historians might debate the origin of foot binding, but rarely do they dwell on the alternative futures that never came to be. You close your eyes, the millet pouch is cold now, but your feet are warm despite everything, and wrapped just tightly enough to remind you that even pain has a rhythm, if you listen closely. The rain is tapering to silence. Tomorrow the basin returns. Tomorrow you'll soak again. It's the day of the small festival, the one no one remembers the name of, but everyone uses as an excuse to cook sticky cakes and wear their second-best robes. The air smells like charcoal and honey, and your house is louder than usual. Cousins you forgot existed are popping in like steamed buns from a crowded bamboo basket. You try to stay out of the way, lingering near the storeroom, pretending to admire a jar of preserved plum skins. But really, you're waiting for the house to empty just enough to reclaim the courtyard for your foot bath. Eventually they trickle out, chasing the sound of gongs and hawkers. You steal the moment. One of the younger maids helps you fill the basin. She's new, doesn't yet know the right temperature, and nearly scalds your ankles. You hiss. She panics. And in the flurry you remember how many quiet adjustments go into making something seem effortless. When you finally lower your feet in, the basin sings with warmth. Today's soak is practical. Mugwort, star anise, a splash of rice wine. Not luxurious, but sharp enough to invigorate. Like a reminder that your feet, though shaped by pressure, still belong to you. And that's when you hear the thud. A sandal, dropped by a child sprinting too fast, skids across the courtyard and lands near your basin. The girl stops, wide-eyed. Her feet are unbound, small but free. She stares at yours, wrapped neatly, toes pointed like punctuation marks. And you stare back. Neither of you says a word. There's a kind of mutual curiosity that settles between generations. You see her fidget, wondering whether to snatch the sandal or run. You gently nudge it toward her with the side of your basin. She snatches it up and vanishes, like a sparrow. You try to refocus, but something has shifted. That small interruption reawakens a quiet thought that visits you from time to time, when no one's watching. It perches in your chest like a silk moth. What if? What if your feet were whole? You exhale. The steam from the basin curls upward like incense, trying to distract you. So you distract yourself in turn. You pull out your foot bath tools, a small lacquer box with compartments for each item, a cloth for drying, a tiny brush for exfoliating calluses, a spoon for measuring salt, a ridiculous but beloved item, the carved jade toe separator. Your cousin swears by it. You only use it on festival days, out of habit, not necessity. Funny, isn't it? All these tools for feet that barely walk. You once heard a story that women in the Forbidden City had an entire attendance devoted to foot care. One for trimming nails, another for embroidery, another just for bathing and wrapping. It sounds absurd until you realise how much time it takes, and how easy it is to make mistakes, the wrong knot, the wrong temperature, and suddenly you're limping for a week. Your foot bath today feels different, not because of ingredients or mood, but because you're listening more closely. You swirl the herbs, feel the water part around your soles, sense how the bones no longer argue but murmur. There's a sort of resignation in them, not defeat, just patience. The same patience you see in the older women who gather on stools in the alley. They stretch their legs with practiced elegance, unwrap their bindings one layer at a time, trading gossip while the steam rises like a shared dream. You joined them once, just once, and were immediately judged for using too much clove. "Trying to pickle yourself?" one joked. You laughed, but used less clove after that. That's the unspoken part of foot care. It's communal in a very private way. Everyone pretends it's solitary, but everyone watches. You think about a fringe rumour, one whispered by the herbalist's apprentice. A village in the south where the women stopped binding 2 generations ago. Said it slowed the harvest, said it made no sense. They still soak though, not to soften but to soothe. A cultural echo long after the voice stopped speaking. You don't know if it's real. You like the idea. The basin cools. You've lingered longer than usual. You remove your feet slow and deliberate, brushing the water from your skin like silk from a loom. You dry them gently. The skin feels refreshed, but the joints throb faintly like an old door frame remembering every season it's weathered. You rewrap with extra care today, each pass of the cloth smooth and steady. You don't pull quite as tightly, just enough. Enough to keep form, not enough to bite. Some days you bind with a little more kindness, not for rebellion, just for breath. There's a kind of artistry to it. You adjust the tension like tuning a zither string, loose enough to hum, tight enough to hold. And as you finish, slipping into your shoes, those embroidered green ones with the frayed tassels, you catch your reflection in the polished basin. It warps your face but steadies your gaze. Outside, the festival drums echo faintly. You know your family will return soon, with sticky cakes, loud voices, and tales of lion dancers who tripped over their own tails. You take one last moment before they arrive, one last breath of herbal steam, a reminder that no matter how much noise the world makes, this ritual, this strange, quiet grace you perform daily, is yours. A ceremony with no audience, yet all the weight of tradition pressing gently at your heels. The evening thickens slowly, like syrup warming in a porcelain pot. Lamps flicker to life across the compound, casting golden puddles on worn stone tiles. Shadows grow long and sleepy. Somewhere in the house, someone strikes a zither string just once, testing the tension. Then silence. Even the crickets pause. You're at the window, not doing much of anything, just watching. Your feet are wrapped, elevated on a small stool padded with old embroidery scraps. The wraps tonight feel tight, but not unbearable, like a memory you haven't thought about in a while but still recognise immediately. You're still thinking about that girl with the sandal, her feet, her look. So tonight, before the soak, you gather a few different herbs, off recipe. You feel like experimenting just a little. You crush dried orange peel, toss in a pinch of mint from last year's harvest, and drizzle in some sesame oil just to see. Grandmother would frown, but she's gone to bed early with a headache. You have the bath to yourself, unsupervised for once. The water darkens with the mixture, a swirl of scent both familiar and foreign. When you lower your feet into the basin, it's like slipping into a dream you haven't had before. The mint prickles, the sesame lingers. Your toes twitch slightly under the wraps, uncertain but curious. You close your eyes. The world softens. You picture not a Ming palace or courtyard, but a tiny farmhouse in the hills. In your mind's eye, there's a woman there, soaking her feet too, but not bound. She's strong, sun-kissed, unbothered. Her basin is a cracked rice bowl, her herbs are wild-picked. She hums while she soaks, a tune without lyrics. You try to hum it too, but it slips away like mist on a mirror. It's strange how often you escape like this during your bath. The routine opens a door in your thoughts. It becomes a vehicle, steeped in tradition, but driving you towards something else, something unscripted. Your left foot aches more than usual tonight. You suspect the bone is shifting again. You feel it, the way some people feel the moon tugging at tides. It's subtle, but real. You lift it slightly, examining the way your skin pales beneath the wrappings, the faint bruises where pressure has settled too long. You loosen it just a bit. A sigh escapes without permission. You remember a story grandmother once told of a concubine who refused to bind her daughter's feet, claiming the child had a divine mark on her heel that would bring the family luck, only if left untouched. The emperor's steward bought the tale, and the girl kept her feet, grew tall, married an officer, lived to 90. Grandmother always told it with a smirk, as if daring you to ask if it was true. You never did. The basin water is cooler now, but you don't mind. It's the sensation, not the temperature, that you chase, the act of tending. Your fingers swish the surface slowly, and the orange peel bumps against your knuckle. The centre's mellowed, but still holds the shape of the original idea, sweet, sharp, unexcitant. You lift your feet out with the care of someone retrieving porcelain from a shelf. You pat them dry with a soft cloth, then pause. Sometimes you delay rewrapping. Not for any particular reason, just to feel the air, to let your feet exist without judgment, without shape, even just for a moment. It's a secret indulgence, one you suspect other women quietly allow themselves to. And then, from the corridor, a voice calls your name. It's your aunt. She wants you to bring your threadwork to the sitting room. Apparently someone's found a new pattern for lotus blossoms and wants your opinion. You call back that you'll come in a moment, but you linger. You dip your fingers into the cooled water and trace a slow circle. The ripples widen, then fade. Like all things, there's something oddly satisfying in this silence. Not loneliness, solitude, the kind that tastes like roasted barley and dusk. You think just for fun, what it might be like to walk barefoot through the snow. A foolish idea, but pleasant to imagine. The sting, the shock, the purity of it. You used to think the purpose of the footbath was only to soften the skin, to make the bindings more bearable. But lately you've begun to suspect it does something more subtle. It gives you a pocket of time, a sliver of self. Amid all the roles you play, daughter, niece, obedient heir to tradition, this small act is yours alone. That fringe scholar who visited once, was it 5 years ago, talked endlessly about ritual, said it was the choreography of belief. You barely understood him then, but now you wonder if he meant this, the way you fold the towel, the way you select the herbs, the way your fingers test the water, always in a clockwise swirl. You suspect you believe in more than you admit, not in spirits or dynasties necessarily, but in motion, in rhythm, in the invisible structure that holds your day together. The basin is empty now. You rinse it, quietly so as not to wake the house. You dry it with a cloth worn thin from years of use. The mint still lingers faintly on your fingertips. You rewrap your feet, slowly, carefully. And then you walk, not with grace, not with ease, but with intention, down the corridor toward the voices and laughter waiting by the lamplight. Your footprints are almost silent. It starts with a knock, soft but distinct. 1, 2. Not the hurried tapping of a child or the flat rap of a servant. This one is deliberate. You glance up from your sewing. A peony, half-stitched, smiles lazily at you from the embroidery frame. The door slides open. It's your cousin, the one with the laugh like a flute and ideas like thunderclouds. She's wrapped in a robe far too extravagant for the afternoon, which means she's been somewhere she wasn't supposed to be, or talked to someone she wasn't supposed to talk to. She flops beside you and exhales dramatically. They're talking about banning it, she says with no context. You blink. Banning what? Binding. The word hangs in the air, heavier than it should be. She leans closer, voice low. They say some scholars wrote a letter to the court, arguing it's, what was the word, inhumane and backward. You arch an eyebrow. Which scholars? The southern ones, obviously, always starting something. She shrugs, then adds, historians still argue whether they were serious or just trying to make noise. You don't say anything. Your fingers find the thread again. Stitch, pull, stitch, pull. It's not that the idea surprises you. Rumours like this pop up every few seasons, like mushrooms after rain. But this one feels different. Sharper somehow, closer. That night your footbath feels conflicted. You choose familiar herbs, ginger, salt, chrysanthemum petals, comfort ingredients, but even as you pour the hot water and watch the flowers unfurl, your mind buzzes. What would it even look like? An empire where girls kept their feet whole, where the only use for a basin was washing away dust, not pain. You lower your feet into the water. The sting hits first, your right heel is still raw from yesterday's slip in the courtyard, and then the warmth seeps in, softens the ache. You exhale, trying to shift your focus, but your cousin's words won't leave you alone. You wonder about that letter, what it actually said. If it used big words like reform and civilization, or if it described the way it feels when your pinky toe grows inward and pretends to be a bone. You suspect it didn't. Men who write letters often forget the body. Still, the conversation floats in the back of your mind as you begin your routine. You clean each foot with a damp cloth, careful not to tug on the fresh scab. You file a small callus that's begun to grow near your arch, wondering absently if it means you've been walking more than usual. You dry gently, patting between the toes, where the skin stays softest and the scent of herbs lingers longest, and then the wrapping. Tonight, you hesitate, just for a second. The cloth is in your hands. It's been washed and dried and folded into the same square shape as always, but it suddenly feels heavier, like the past, compressed into muslin. You begin, slowly. Each loop is a decision, each knot a whisper of compliance, or is it care? There's no easy answer. You recall another fringe story, this one older, a midwife who unbound her own feet after marriage and claimed she could run again, said she ran through the fields at night just to feel wind on her ankles. She died young, they said. Some blamed a ghost, others blamed her own pride. Either way, she became a cautionary tale, or a martyr, depending on who told the story. You've never run, not truly. You once chased a paper lantern down the street after a strong wind blew it free. You caught it. It tore in your hands. Still for 3 seconds you moved like water over stone, you remember that. Sometimes you revisit it during the soak. Your cousin barges in without knocking this time. She's flushed from the heat and possibly from arguing. They're furious, she says. Half the family says the scholars are traitors. The other half says they're idiots. You glance at her. And you? She plucks a chrysanthemum petal from the water and flicks it into the air. I think my feet hurt. A beat. Then both of you laugh. Not loud, just enough. Later she helps you dry your feet, an unspoken offering of solidarity. You notice the bruises on her ankles, fresher than yours. Her bindings are tighter lately. She's been courted after all. The price of presentation. You hand her the cloth and she begins rewrapping hers beside you. Neither of you speaks. There's something oddly comforting in doing it together, like a duet without music. After she leaves, you sit for a while staring at the basin. The herbs have clumped in the centre, forming a tiny raft. You imagine it floating to the southern scholars, delivering a petal-shaped message. You aren't sure what it says, but it probably smells like ginger and regret. You wake to thunder, not the distant poetic kind that grumbles over mountains and invites you to drink tea. No, this is close. Cracking, impatient, like the skies had enough decorum for one dynasty and is now loudly quitting. Rain follows immediately, thick, slanting sheets that drape across the courtyard like a curtain being pulled on the day. You sit up, annoyed that the leaking roof has once again chosen the precise corner where your shoes rest. Water glistens on the worn silk soles, mockingly of course. The footbath today won't be optional. You pull your robe tighter and limp to the storeroom to gather supplies. The usual basin is missing. Someone's borrowed it, probably to soak eels or cabbage. You're left with the shallow one, the one shaped like a melon slice. It's meant for summer, not for this sort of weather. Still you make do. You add warm water, a scoop of salt and a single stick of cinnamon bark because, frankly, the smell's nice. Rain drums the tiles like impatient fingers. You set the basin beside the brazier, careful not to scorch the mat, and lower yourself beside it. The moment your feet slip in, the sting of cold fades into a dull, promising warmth. Your mind wanders, as it always does here. You remember when you first learned to bind properly. Not the clumsy child's version, but the methodical, purposeful binding that left no room for error or softness. Your aunt taught you, not your mother. She couldn't bear it. She'd watch from the doorway, wringing her hands and whispering corrections only after your aunt had left the room. The aunt was efficient, no coddling. She said, "Pain now, beauty forever," and tightened the cloth with all the mercy of a tax collector. You wept. She hummed. Now your own technique is gentler, but the memory of her fingers lingers in your muscles. It's funny how touch outlives sound. The thunder crashes again. You flinch, accidentally splashing water onto your robe. The cinnamon bark bobs like a lazy dragon. You smile faintly. You've always liked storms. They excuse everything. You can skip chores, abandon embroidery, even nap in the middle of the day. Storms are nature's permission slips. So today, you make your bath longer. You add a second stick of cinnamon, just to rebel. You close your eyes, letting the water speak to you in warmth and waves. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, a servant slips and curses. Another shushes her. The household is trying to maintain dignity, but rain makes fools of everyone. You think again of that southern village, the one rumoured to never bind. Historians never agreed on its location, if it even existed. Some say it was a misinterpretation, a mistranslation. Others claim it was deliberately erased from maps. You like that theory best. It makes the village feel more real, not less. You picture it now. Sloped roofs, laundry lines tangled with red ribbons, girls running barefoot through wet grass, mud splashing their calves, freedom in their stride. They don't need basins. They have puddles. Thunder makes them laugh, not flinch. You wonder if they ever think about you. Probably not. Your cousin appears again, she's making a habit of it, and squats beside your bath. Her own robe is damp from a leak in her room. She stares at the water. "Cinnamon," she says. You nod. "Risky." You shrug. "He was bored." She laughs. "Everything's bored, even the storm." Then softer. "They say the governor's wife has unbound her feet." You blink. She's southern, remember. Some are saying it's symbolic, a gesture. Your cousin traces a finger through the steam. Others say she slipped and broke a toe and is using this as an excuse. You say nothing, but your heart ticks a little faster. Not from hope, from caution. Gestures are dangerous. Still, that night, when you dry your feet, you stare at them longer than usual. They look pale, pruny, slightly flushed from the heat, still shaped like questions that never get answered. You don't rebind them right away. Instead, you prop them up near the brazier and let the air touch them, just for a while, just until the thunder fades. The mornings have begun to smell like wood smoke and jasmine. There's a freshness in the air that wasn't there last week. Maybe spring is finally making its quiet entrance, creeping under doors and through lattice windows, teasing the courtyard into bloom. You rise early as always and prepare your footbath while the house still dreams. The basin gleams in the first light. You add water heated over the brazier, then drop in dried chrysanthemum petals, some crushed ginger root, and a few sprigs of honeysuckle you manage to snatch from the garden. The scent is light but sharp, a perfect balance. Your feet ache this morning, but you let the water do its work without hurry. As you soak, you think about the rituals, how they've morphed over the years. Once, soaking feet was purely medicinal, a way to soothe the relentless ache of hard labour and bound bones. Now it's also a kind of meditation, a small rebellion of softness against a world that demands resilience. You recall a scholar who once argued that foot baths were the earliest form of self-care, an idea almost too gentle for such a harsh tradition. Historians still debate if this was intentional or just a convenient byproduct. You lean toward the latter, but it's nice to think otherwise. Your gaze drifts to the window. A faint smile tugs at your lips when you see the servant girl balancing a tray of teacups, her own feet unbound, carrying her load with a steady grace. You wonder if she dreams of her slippers or open fields. You dry your feet carefully, massaging the arches with oil infused with lavender and camellia. The scent lingers, a quiet signature of your morning ritual. You think about how scents stick to memory, how a simple fragrance can carry you through hours of endless work or moments of quiet reprieve. Your cousin visits again, this time with news. She's unbound, she says, eyes sparkling with a mixture of disbelief and excitement. The governor's wife, no bindings. You try not to let your expression betray you. What does that mean? Freedom, your cousin says, as if the word tastes like honey. Or scandal, she pauses. Historians still wonder if it was political theatre or personal choice. You nod slowly. It's a reminder that tradition is not a fixed thing. It's a living, breathing dance between power and desire, control and release. Your footbath finishes. You step out feeling lighter somehow. The tightness of the binding seems less oppressive today. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in a lacquered mirror, a woman balanced between past and future, between duty and quiet defiance. You wonder what the coming days will bring. Evenings grow longer, stretching like lazy cats across the courtyard walls. You settle into the familiar rhythm of your footbath ritual, the basin warming beside you as dusk seeps into every corner of the house. Tonight, you add jasmine and a pinch of saffron to the water, an indulgence that feels more like a secret than a routine. Your fingers dip into the bath, tracing lazy circles over your skin. The bindings are looser tonight, perhaps from careful loosening or just wear. You think about how every twist of cloth holds stories, tales of patience, pain, pride, and sometimes quiet resistance. You recall a tale whispered by an elder servant about a woman who unbound her feet on her wedding night, not to shock the family, but to reclaim herself. It was dangerous, they said, but also brave. Historians still argue whether such acts were common or isolated rebellions whispered between silk and shadow. The air hums with the scent of herbs and rain lingering from a sudden shower. Outside lanterns flicker, casting soft pools of light that sway gently with the night breeze. The world feels both fragile and vast. Your thoughts drift to the future, to the possibility of walking freely, without pain, without expectation. It's a strange notion, almost unimaginable after years of wrapping and restriction. You carefully dry your feet, massaging a blend of camellia and ginger oil into the skin. The warmth spreads slowly, a quiet comfort in the dim room. The basin is emptied and dried, ready for tomorrow's ritual. You tuck yourself into bed, feeling the soft ache of the day settle into your bones. Outside, the night sings softly. The house feels quieter these days, the usual bustle softened, like the fading notes of a lute's final chord. You find yourself walking slower, savouring the moments between chores and conversations, lingering over cups of tea that steam and curl like gentle reminders to breathe. Your footbaths continue, each one a small sanctuary. Tonight, the water holds crushed mint leaves and a sprinkle of camphor, cooling and invigorating. The scent wraps around you like a whispered promise. You think about the girls in the village who watch your feet when you step outside, curious and cautious. You catch their eyes sometimes, and you wonder what stories they tell themselves about this ritual of binding and bathing. You recall the whispered debates among the elders, some hopeful, others resigned. Historians still puzzle over how much influence those letters and protests had in shifting attitudes. Was it a quiet revolution or a slow erosion? Your fingers trace the gentle curves of your feet, now marked with both tenderness and scars. Each line, each callus, is a map of endurance. You finish the bath, feeling both the weight of tradition and the lightness of possibility. Tomorrow you decide you might unbind just a little more. You return to the courtyard just as twilight drapes the walls in deep indigo. Lanterns flicker to life one by one, their soft glow pooling around the footbath. Tonight's ritual feels weightier, as if this aeson and its swirling steam hold the sum of every soak you've ever known. You set down the basin with care. Its aged wood feels warm from the late afternoon sun. A faint scent of lingering sandalwood dances around the air, mixing with the musk of damp earth. You kneel, placing your hands on the basin's rim, and breathe in deeply. The courtyard hushes almost imperceptibly around you. No creaking doors or distant chatter, just the steady rhythm of your own breath. You feel the weight of your wrapped feet, each layer of linen a reminder of history's insistence that beauty must be hard-earned. Tonight, though, you sense something different. A closing act, or perhaps an opening one. As you pour in the steaming water, drawn from the well and warmed over glowing coals, you watch droplets cascade, sending ripples across the surface. You've learned to time the temperature by ear. A gentle hiss means it's too hot. A soft exhale of steam means it's just right. A pinch of crushed green tea leaves falls into the basin, effusing a subtle bitterness that reminds you of mornings spent reading calligraphy scrolls under winter light. Next, a handful of dried lavender blossoms drifts on the surface, their purple petals like scattered memories. You reach for a small ceramic cup filled with rice wine and tilt it slowly, letting pale amber fluid pool around your feet. The rice wine makes the water swirl in soft eddies before settling into a luminous, honeyed current. Your feet, bound, shaped, disciplined, sink into this fragrant pool. The first moment stings as the warmth kisses taut skin, then yields to a soothing wave that threads through arches and ankles. You close your eyes. The only sound is the subtle slosh of water and the distant chirp of a cricket. The lavender scent wraps around your senses, softening the sharp edge of the bindings. You shift slightly, letting water flood into every crevice between cloth and skin. Even the faint pressure of the linen becomes bearable, as though the water itself negotiates with the cloth, tension eased by the gentle press of warmth. A mainstream historical fact settles in your mind. By the 16th century, foot bindings in Ming China had become virtually universal among handwomen of the elite and merchant classes, signifying status and marriageability. This fact isn't new to you. You live it each time linen presses into your flesh. But tonight, floating in rice wine and lavender, it resonates differently. Not as a condemnation, but as lens to view each layer of your own life. The courtyard's wooden beams are cool overhead, and a breeze ruffles the silk ribbons hanging from the eaves. Petals from a nearby magnolia tree drift lazily down, tickling the basin's surface. You imagine each petal as a memory. The first soak with ginger and goji berries, the introduction of sandalwood in the palace-style bath, the stolen moments when you delayed rewrapping just to feel air on your skin. Every petal has a story, a quiet ache, a victory of endurance. You reach out and let one land on your big toe, pale, almost translucent in the lantern's glow. A quirky fringed tidbit surfaces. Some itinerant healers claim that adding crushed deer antler to the footbath would strengthen the bones, making future rebindings easier. You cringe at the thought of deer antler mingling with lavender, but laugh softly at the idea. The fringe remedies you've encountered over the years, snakeskin, crushed pearls, powdered donkey-hide gelatin, feel like whispered plot lines in a story you never really believed. Yet each carried weight in its time. Each held hope that something more than plain water could alleviate the ache. A sense of ritual vigilance fills you. You dip a small brush into the water, gently exfoliating dead skin from the curve of your arch. The brush bristles feel foreign against bound flesh, but familiar in purpose. You work carefully, mindful of the delicate balance between softness and structure. Every stroke is deliberate, circular motions around the widest part of your sole, a gentle sweep along the tendon behind your heel. The water carries away residue, leaving tender pink skin in its wake. You feel a faint pop as a thin flake detaches, an echo of every moment you've chosen to soften, to care, to bear. You think of grandmother teaching you the rhythm of water and linen. She used to hum an old folk tune while she wrapped your feet at dawn. The tune's notes flutter through your mind now, though you can't recall the exact melody. You hum softly as the brush dips again, this time to ward off fatigue, and the lavender scent seems to encourage the hum, responding as if you're softly calling to it. A deeper reflection stirs. Historians still wrestle with how foot-binding rituals shaped women's identities, not just in physical form, but in social standing and self-perception. This debate swirls like steam around you, reminding you that your experience is part of something larger. Each vessel, each blend of herbs, each basin holds countless stories of families, of women bound by custom, of resistance, and, at times, of quiet submission. You realise that your own rituals are both a continuation and an interpretation, an intimate dance with a tradition that's older than your grandmother's grandmother. The water cools imperceptibly, but you don't rush. Instead, you tilt your head back and let the lantern glow paint soft shadows on the courtyard's walls. You inhale the mingled aromas, rice wine's sweetness, lavender's calm, green tea's edge, and feel a slow tide of acceptance rise within you. The basin's curve cradles your feet like a cradle once held you. The world beyond these walls might be shifting, scholars pushing, villages unbinding, whispers of reform weaving through letters, but right now you occupy this liminal space, neither fully tied to the past nor yet free. You rub your soaked feet with your palms, feeling the warmth sink into joints that have known only pressure and release. You visualize each bone uncoiling, flexing as though waking from a long sleep. Even bound, your feet remember what it was to press into soft earth, to bend and pivot. For a moment, you let your mind wander to that rebel girl with unbound feet who walked through the rain. You imagine her laughter, the slick stones beneath her, the way her feet might have traced patterns in mud without shame. You dip the brush one last time into the basin and circle each toe, releasing the final traces of dead skin. Tiny flakes drift on the water's surface like pale blossoms. You let them be, a final confession of transformation. You lift your feet slowly, letting the water drip in silent rivulets onto the wooden tiles. You pat them dry with a cloth scented faintly of jasmine, grandmother's favourite, and feel the linen cloths waiting in a pile at your side. The binding begins. You wrap each strip of linen around your toes, over the arch, pulling with a measured strength. You notice that your hands now know the rhythm, how tightly to pull, where to double back, how to knot in a way that secures form but spares nerve. You pause briefly at the final knot, pressing the linen so it hangs rather than bites. You've learned over the years that this slight yielding makes the difference between a night of tolerable rest and one spent shifting in agony. Your shoes, hand-embroidered slippers with peonies on the vamp, rest at the edge of the basin. You know that once you slip them on, your feet will be hidden again, but the memory of the South, its scents, its warmth, its softness, will linger under the bindings like a secret. You slip into the slippers, feeling the cushioned sole mould against your bandaged skin. You stand and your posture shifts, centered, poised, balanced. You look up at the lanterns, their golden glow, flickering like fireflies caught in silk. A breeze stirs the ribbons overhead, and you catch a final whiff of lavender as you bow your head in gratitude to your ancestors, to grandmother, to the rituals that shaped you. In this last soak, you have woven together the many threads of your life, pain and comfort, tradition and quiet defiance, history and personal narrative. Your feet are both burdened and blessed by this legacy. You take a step forward, letting your bound feet guide you in measured strides across the courtyard's cool stones. The basin stands empty now, its purpose fulfilled. You carry its memory with you, a whisper of steam and petal and promise as you slip back into the house and follow the glow of lanterns to whatever comes next. Now you lie in bed, the night's hush wrapping around you like a blanket. Every breath slows, every heartbeat softens. Picture your feet, snug within their linen layers, resting against the cool silk of your bedding. Outside, the lantern light fades, leaving only the echo of your own thoughts. The lavender-scented water you soaked in has seeped into memory, lingering at the edge of sleep. Feel the gentle rhythm of your breath carrying you towards stillness. The courtyard's stone tiles have cooled, their warmth now part of your bones. Imagine a final petal drifting across those stones, touching each memory of soaking and wrapping and scent. Let it remind you that rituals change with time, but their silence remains. Tonight, the world outside these walls may shift and stir, but here you're sheltered, held by your own steady practice. Allow your thoughts to drift like petals on water, delicate, unhurried. The bindings you wear are not only a requirement, they are hymns to endurance, whispers of strength. Let them guide you into a calm slumber. As your eyes close, imagine lavender fields at dawn, the sun's first rays dancing on dew-laced blooms. Hear a distant flute, soft and yearning, weaving a lullaby that carries you beyond the courtyard and into a tranquil horizon. There, your bound feet rest gently on grass, unpressured, free in spirit, even if not in form. Sleep now, dear listener. Rest beneath the same lantern glow that witnessed your final ritual. May these whispered reflections and gentle images carry you into dreams as soft as warmed water and as sweet as drifting petals.